secure, trusted, and resilient cybersecurity and digital identification. In every country that is undergoing digital transformation, one lesson stands out. Digital progress cannot be sustained without trust. As Liberia builds its digital foundations, protecting those systems, the data that they hold, and the people they serve has become absolutely essential. Cybersecurity is no longer just a technical concern. It's a question of national resilience, economic stability, and public confidence. A single incident can disrupt the entire system, energy systems, and compromise the financial networks or undermine trust in public institutions. But with the right strategy, governance, and partnerships, cybersecurity becomes an enabler, allowing digital services to grow safely and responsibly. Over the past year, Liberia has taken some important steps in this direction, as we heard yesterday, including the cyber crime bill and data protection bill that has been submitted to the parliament, and also developing the draft national cybersecurity strategy, which will be presented today, and conducting a baseline cybersecurity assessment and engaging both public and private actors in shaping a more coordinated response to emerging threats. These milestones represent the first building blocks of a secure digital future. So today's session will unpack those efforts. We'll begin with the baseline cybersecurity assessment, which our online presenter will soon guide you shortly, and that provided an evidence-based of Liberia's current readiness and vulnerabilities. Next, we'll hear about the draft national cybersecurity strategy and action plan, which outlines the government's vision and step forward. That will be followed by the insights from the cybersecurity public-private partnership report. The government doesn't see this as just the government efforts, but really would like to engage with the private sector and nurture the industry to secure strengthen the national capacity. So we will hear about the vision and the recommendations in terms of how to strengthen the overall landscape and then the ecosystem. And then after the presentation, we'll open the floor, as we did like yesterday, for a brief Q&A for the presenters, and then move into the panel discussion. So the panel will bring together, the experts from the government and the private sector to explore how Liberia can build a sustainable cybersecurity ecosystem, one that combines the clear policy, practical investment, and public awareness. As we move through this morning, I encourage you to think about one key question. How can Liberia make cybersecurity not just policy or a project, but a shared national principle and discipline that's really built into every system, institution, every network, and every digital service. So with that, I'm gonna hand it back to our MC to lead us through the session.
Let's give her a round of applause, please. The next conversation focuses on the baseline cybersecurity assessment, and this presentation will be done by Mr. Rafał Rohozinski, and he's the CEO and Principal ex-SecDef Asian virtually. Rafał?
Good morning, Monrovia. Just to make sure that you can all hear me.
You're loud and clear. Go ahead.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, and I'm very sorry that I can't be there in person. As you can see, I'm sitting here in my jacket at 5 o'clock in the morning in Canada, much colder than probably you are. So, the intent of the baseline assessment was to provide a clear idea of the status of cybersecurity in Liberia, recognizing that cybersecurity is absolutely crucial and important to digital transformation, which is the topic of this conference. In this talk, I want to give you a sense of this baseline assessment, what we looked at, how it provided critical input to the development of the national strategy. And later on, we'll talk a little bit about one of the very innovative aspects that we identified, which is the use of public-private partnerships. What seemed innovative when we first identified it, now, after the election of President Trump in the United States and the change in global order, may actually be the best path for Liberia to follow. It's important that we have a clear-eyed view on all of this. The future is digital, that much is certain. But at the same time, Liberia faces significant challenges given the changes in the global environment, which includes the end of the U.S. assistance programs that have sustained much of the country's development trajectory over the past 2 decades, as well as broader changes in the global environment that have started to erode the effectiveness of the international rules-based system. But before I begin, let me be clear about what this presentation is and what it's not. This is not a celebration of progress. It's not a catalog of achievements, and it's certainly not another PowerPoint exercise in checking boxes against international frameworks. Rather, it's a frank discussion of where Liberia stood in 2024 and where it stands today in securing its digital future. More importantly, it's a detailed examination of what our baseline assessment revealed and what specific recommendations mean in practice and how they can directly inform the national cybersecurity strategy that you'll hear about next. Digital transformation is not optional, it's inevitable. Currently, there's over 350 kilometers of fiber optic cable that now runs through Monrovia, laying the foundations for economic growth and public service delivery. Mobile connectivity has reached millions, government agencies are digitizing, banks are moving online. But here's the uncomfortable truth that our assessment documented in detail. Every meter of that fiber, every online transaction, every digital government service creates new vulnerabilities. Liberia has very limited capabilities to anticipate, detect, or respond to cyber incidents. This isn't speculation. Our baseline assessment identified at least 7 known or suspected incidents in critical infrastructure operators in recent years. The publicly documented examples tell a pretty sobering story. You're probably all familiar with this. In June 2024, Liberia's top-level domain was subject to a significant cyber attack that disconnected Liberia for almost 48 hours, disrupting government websites and, in fact, anything that depended on DNS. According to reputable local organizations, this involved the possible use of DDoS attacks and the exploitation of pretty significant DNS vulnerabilities. Earlier, in 2018, attackers attempted to steal $32 million from a Liberian financial institution, an attempt attributed to state-sponsored actors from the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. The sophistication of the attack highlighted the vulnerabilities in Liberia's financial sector defenses and its weakness to guard against it. But the threat landscape extends beyond sophisticated attacks. Our assessment found domestic cyber threats targeting the general population. In 2023, there was a spike in technology-facilitated gender-based violence associated with social media account hackings. And today, foreign governments, including my own, Canada, Australia, issue regular advisories cautioning their citizens about the high incidence of cyber fraud originating from Liberia. These incidents occur against a backdrop that our assessment found deeply troubling. According to the latest threat intelligence, Liberia ranks 3rd in West Africa for denial of service attacks and 2nd in the second half of 2024, experiencing over 1,200 attacks. And these are not isolated incidents. There are symptoms of a systematic gap between digital ambitions and digital resilience. Our assessment, conducted over March and April 2024 with extensive stakeholder consultations of over 40 key actors from government, academia, critical infrastructure, revealed a picture that's more complex than initial impressions might suggest. And let me walk you through what we found across 7 key areas of our assessment. First, governance and institutional structure. As of April 2024, Liberia had not yet established a functional system of national cybersecurity governance. There was no central authority mandated for cybersecurity, and there was no coordinated interagency, cross-sectoral activity engaging stakeholder groups in core cybersecurity needs. In 2019, or the 2019 ICT policy, which set the goal of creating a national cybersecurity advisory committee, there was no evidence of any notable action towards this goal. Draft legislation and cybersecurity initiatives, which had circulated since 2020, several key entities clearly had roles in cybersecurity governance, but they lacked both capacity and coordination. The Ministry of Posts and Telecommunications, which led on the development, lacked the resources to do so. The Liberia Telecommunications Authority, that had regulatory powers, hadn't exercised it for cybersecurity. The Ministry of Justice, which was assigned a legal framework to develop it under draft legislation, hadn't. And the Ministry of Defense, which had plans for a cyber defense unit, had no cyber defense strategy against which to build it. Most critically, the existing frameworks did not provide sufficient mandate for any institution to decisively act on this issue. Second, risk management. And here a picture of a star. There was no national cyber risk assessment methodology to speak of, no centralized reviews of risk, no analysis of the threat landscape, and no formal procedures to identify vulnerabilities. In 2024, none of the Liberian institutions had conducted a cybersecurity readiness exercise, either individually or as a group. Basic information, security policies were missing at almost all government Liberian institutions, with only the central bank and the Liberia Revenue Authority working on developing functional internal policies. Even the Ministry of State for Presidential Affairs had minimal IT infrastructure and is only planning to digitize its processes at that time. Cyber risk, quite frankly, was simply not understood by decision makers. The people we interviewed indicated that the general level of awareness was minimal among policymakers from high-level executives to the legislature. And this was a prevalent sense that cybersecurity was being ignored due to the limited IT infrastructure, low digital maturity, and competition with other priorities that the government had. 3, preparedness and resilience. Revenue-generating institutions showed higher levels of investment into cybersecurity. In particular, the Liberia Revenue Authority provides infrastructure for a network of 21 government entities that collect revenue and actually make the government function. The Integrated Financial Management Information Systems Network connected 87 different entities. And despite the absence of regulatory incentives, critical infrastructure entities remain one of the most advanced in cyber readiness within Liberia. Telecommunications companies have dedicated information security staff and equipment, but not in Liberia. Orange Liberia is serviced by a global security operations center in France. Lone Star MTN bases their security operations team with responsibilities for Liberia and South Africa. More seriously, there is no national computer security incident response team. Gaps in local cybersecurity capabilities and lack of skilled workforce remain barriers. And many of our interviewees noted that with average government salaries of $500 a month or less for IT professionals, attracting talent into government is highly problematic. Fourth, critical infrastructure and essential services. This is where we found perhaps the most concerning gaps. There's no agreed upon definition of what constitutes critical infrastructure in Liberia. No inventory of essential systems, no understanding of the interdependencies. The 3 main telecommunications companies and energy providers had some cybersecurity measures, but these operated in isolation from government oversight. There was no cyber-specific security regulations, no incident reporting requirements, and no information sharing mechanisms. 5th, legal, policy, and regulatory frameworks. Here we found significant momentum, but also concerning gaps. Several draft pieces of legislation were in development, including the Cybercrime Act and updates to the ICT policy, but none in 2024 had actually been finalized or adopted. The existing regulatory frameworks lacked cybersecurity requirements. Telecommunications operators were not required to maintain domestic incident response capabilities. Banking supervision regulations had no cybersecurity requirements, except for minimal standards for email payment providers. Importantly, we identified concerns from local cybersecurity research community about the lack of legal protections for good faith vulnerability disclosures. Researchers who have tried to help institutions have been threatened with lawsuits and other sanctions. 6, capacity building and awareness. Liberian universities are producing cybersecurity graduates, but there's no local market demand because the regulatory requirements of create jobs in Liberia do not exist. When incidents occur, response teams fly in from South Africa or from Senegal. We found a small community of local experts capable of risk identification and security research, and actually quite good by global standards, but they're operating without institutional support or protection. And finally, 7, international cooperation. Engagement with international bodies has been inconsistent, leading to uncoordinated efforts and risks of undermining sustained interest from development partners. Based on these findings, our assessment made recommendations that were designed to help shape or inform a national strategy and put it more on a realistic basis. Rather than aspirational goals disconnected from current realities, we structured the recommendations to provide a practical foundation for strategic development. Now let me walk you through a little bit of this, just so you can understand how it informed what you'll hear later around the national strategy. So priority one is establish strategic and operational governance. Our assessment found that governance doesn't exist in any meaningful sense. So the first recommendation was to establish this foundation before attempting anything else. This shaped the strategy's immediate call for appointing a chief cybersecurity coordinator with real authority, not just another government position, but a linchpin that actually makes everything possible. We recommended that this position be placed either within the Ministry of Posts and Telecommunications or within the Ministry of State, as this directly informs the strategy's governance structure. We also shaped the strategy's approach to activating a National Cybersecurity Advisory Council with clear decision-making authority, and not just an advisory role. Because we found no incident response capabilities, we recommended starting with a temporary interagency incident response task force, a lean, focused coordination body rather than one focused on operations, because this really is the cornerstone for an implementation approach. 2, accelerate policy and legal frameworks. The assessment revealed that the draft legislations that have been circulating since 2020 have not been adopted. So this shaped the strategy's emphasis on fast-tracking implementation, but also recommendation to separate cybercrime provisions from broader cybersecurity governance, a clear distinction which the strategy helped to incorporate. We found concerning gaps around legal protections for security researchers, so we put into the strategy the need to address both the disclosure frameworks, ensuring that good faith researchers have protection. 3, introduce light touch regulatory reforms. And this is where our recommendations became the most innovative and directly interesting. Rather than heavy-handed compliance regimes that would overwhelm institutional capacity, we recommended that would target operating licenses. Our assessment found that universities are producing cybersecurity graduates who cannot find employment because there's no market demand. This shaped the strategy's approach to mandating cybersecurity requirements as licensing conditions for critical infrastructure operators, helping to create a natural market demand while improving security. This approach, which has been successfully used in India, Brazil, UK, became central to the strategy because it addresses multiple problems simultaneously. It creates jobs for Liberian graduates, it ensures rapid incident response, stimulates the domestic market, and places costs on operators who profit from services rather than overstretched government budgets. 4th, build practical capabilities incrementally. Our assessment found that attempting to immediately build a national cyber security incident response team would likely fail due to capacity constraints. This shaped the strategy's graduated approach, starting with coordinating mechanisms, providing their work, and then evolving them towards permanent institutions. We recommended exploring secondment opportunities from the private sector or even engaging private sector companies for specialized services. 5, create market incentives through regulation. And here's where the assessment revealed something most cybersecurity strategies miss. You don't need to train thousands of professionals if there are no jobs for them. This insight shaped the strategy's approach to using a combination of regulation incentives to create that natural market. By requiring operators to maintain in-country capabilities, the strategy stimulates domestic cybersecurity market. By mandating incident reporting, it creates demand for compliance expertise. By establishing procurement standards, it drives the demand for security auditing. 6, establish risk assessments and management processes. Our assessment found no national risk assessment methodologies, and this informed the approach for a call for comprehensive risk landscape assessments to baseline vulnerabilities and inform implementation priorities. We also informed the strategy's approach to the secure by design procurement standards and requirements that all future technology investments align against security principles from the outset. 7, coordinate international assistance. Our assessment found that engagement with international bodies had been inconsistent. This informed the strategy's emphasis on positioning the National Cybersecurity Coordinator to align external assistance with Liberia's strategic goals rather than programming. course, not changing at all. The changing global environment is which is why these features offer valuable insights that are assessed examined in detail. Togo pioneered an innovative approach to the rest of many of the resource constraints Liberia faces. In 2019, 2021, Togo established its National Response Security Incident Team as a joint venture between the government and the private sector called Cyber Defense Africa. This entity provides commercial security operations center services for a fee while offering national cybersecurity functions for free to Togolese entities. The commercial revenue stream makes it self-sustaining. The government invested only 2 million euros against 3 million from the private sector partner, with an additional 7 million borrowed from a local bank. By 2023, half these loans had already been paid. This model addresses the fundamental sustainability question. How do you maintain specialized cybersecurity capabilities when government budgets can't compete with the private sector salaries? Sierra Leone launched its National Cybersecurity Coordination Center and National Incident Response Team in January 25 with World Bank support. The timing makes this particularly relevant for Liberia. It's a real-time example of what implementation looks like in a similar context. Ghana's Cybersecurity Authority operates under the Ministry of Communication and Digitization, also funded through the World Bank program. But Ghana's experience shows institutional evolution. It started as a National Cybersecurity Secretariat in 2017, became the National Cybersecurity Center in 2018, and only evolved to its current authority in 2021. Côte d'Ivoire houses its National Incident Response Team within the telecommunications regulator, but plays a national coordination role for all sectoral teams. This model leverages existing regulatory infrastructure while maintaining a national scope. Now, these models demonstrate several crucial points. First, that there are multiple viable paths forward. The choice depends on the local content and constraints. Second, sustainability requires either dedicated government funding or alternative revenue models. And third, successful implementation requires political will and coordination between sectors. Most important, all successful models started with governance coordination mechanisms before building technical capabilities. So before I conclude, let me return to the global context I mentioned from the beginning. The changes in the international environment, including shifts in traditional donor relationships and the erosion of rules-based systems, make Liberia's cybersecurity even more consequential. In an environment where traditional sources of technical assistance may be less reliable, building domestic cybersecurity capabilities becomes not just an economic imperative, but a strategic one. The incidents we documented from North Korean actors demonstrate that Liberia is already in the crosshairs of international cyber operations. The National Cybersecurity Strategy that follows this assessment hopefully recognizes this reality. It's designed not just to protect the digital infrastructure, but ensure Liberia's digital transformations contribute to genuinely sovereign and economic independence. Our assessment provided a baseline. The national strategy provides the framework, but the implementation requires understanding sequences and dependencies. Strategy can't be implemented all at once. Our assessment makes it clear that the capacity constraints are real. Instead, it requires a phased approach that builds momentum and demonstrates success before expanding scope. And this idea is embedded in the strategy. But this sequencing only works if there is sustained political commitment at the highest level. Our assessment found that previous initiatives failed not because of technical inadequacy, but because of the governance gap and the lack of sustained priority. Liberia is at a crossroads, not only because of cyber threats, every country faces those, but because the decisions that will be made over the next 12 to 24 months will determine whether Liberia's digital transformation is resilient or fragile, sustainable or dependent, empowering or exploitative. The opportunities are real. 8% of world GDP and is projected to reach 17 by 2028. The investments flowing into connectivity, e-government, and digital finance and services create genuine possibilities for economic growth and citizen empowerment. But these opportunities come with risks. Managing these risks requires more than just good intentions. It requires governance, it requires regulation, it requires coordination between public and private sectors. It requires sustained political commitment. The assessment provided a baseline reality check. The national strategy provides a roadmap, but implementation requires choices. Choices about priorities, choices about resources, choices about what kind of digital future Liberia wants to build. cost of inaction is clear. The cyber incidents impacting the .lr domain last June was a warning shot. The next attack may not be so easily contained. The next financial institution targeted may not escape with just an attempted death. But the cost of action, real action, not cosmetic action, is also clear. It requires making hard choices about priorities. It requires sustained investment. It requires telling operators they must invest in Liberian capabilities. The strategy provides a framework, but the choices and commitments must come from Liberia itself. Thank you for your attention. I look forward to our discussions and seeing how the national strategy translates these findings into actionable commitments.
Thank you, Raphael. That was quite an intensive presentation. All right, so eventually we'll come to a point where we do question and answer. But I like to say that the detailed report will be shared via email. So if you signed on to the registration paper at the door and you placed your email there, or you can still do that and you get a copy of the report that will be shared later. Now, in response to the report, the government of Liberia has been working on what is known as next steps. And a national cybersecurity strategy and action plan is up. To talk about this and do a formal presentation, I will now call to this podium the head of Project Management Office and Cybersecurity Coordinator at the Ministry of Posts and Telecoms, Mr. D. Nalon Ken. Let's give him that turn.
Thank you, Jim.
So your presentation, you can just use this to. Okay.
He has it.
That means flipping from one to another. You just use the pointer. You're already up on the screen.
Thank you. Thank you. As Rob was saying about the attack last year, there was somebody who stood and did very well when that thing took place. I want to recognize Matthew Ravel. He reached out to the Internet Society and they were very instrumental in helping us getting that thing over. So beginning with slide 1, the National Cybersecurity Strategy, it is a document that Rob was referring to that is being launched today. So the government of Liberia is so happy to have that. So starting up with the background, as you will see on the screen, we have the critical. Okay, sorry. So as you will see from the background, we have the critical overreaching of framework. Now, if you go through the listing we have over there, starting up with a critical overreaching framework, it is trying to tell us that firstly, it is a bit of a background of everything that happened up to getting the national cybersecurity strategy up and running. So it serves as a core framework that will guide all future national cybersecurity policy, laws, and legislation. The document built on the lessons from the past. So we did have the very beginning, from 2020 up the way to 2022. They were able to compile documents that brought up to this cybersecurity national strategy. So the new strategy was developed as a technical, analytical, and support from the World Bank to SAMDEC, who did the presentation just now. Once again, the cybersecurity is an overreaching roadmap. Why the national cybersecurity strategy? So why do we need national cybersecurity strategy? What makes it so important to us? First, the strategy sets out a clear strategic vision. It is meant to tell us where we go, what we want, and how we get it done. What kind of digital environment we want to build. One that is safe, resilient, and trusted. Second, it defines key objectives and how to get there. So pathway or practical steps we can take to strengthen national cybersecurity capacity, improve incident response, and build public awareness. Third, strategic document of this level allows us to take a phased approach, recognizing that not everything can be done at once. The strategy lays out short-term priorities, or what we can achieve now, what will be achieved in the long term, or what we can achieve in the future. Finally, it aligns cybersecurity with Liberia's broader national development strategy. Cybersecurity is not separate from national development. It is a foundation for digital transformation. It is really a fundamental element in protecting Liberia's cyberspace. How was this done? The method that we used, as you will see from up there, it starts from Mon 1 all the way to 5 and 9, then as to where we are today. To develop the new cybersecurity strategy, the team followed a structured and inclusive process, one that combines research, diagnosis, and broader consultation. The work began with about 3 months of comprehensive desk review, reviewing Liberia's existing ICT and cybersecurity framework, international best practices, and lessons learned from other countries in the region. Next, the team carried out a diagnostic mission and stakeholder consultation. This involved engaging more than 40 institutions across government, critical infrastructure sectors, academia, civil society, and private sector to understand the role, the work, the challenges, and opportunities within Liberia's cyber security ecosystem. By month 6, the team completed a baseline assessment which provided a clear picture of Liberia's current cybersecurity readiness and included a set of targeted recommendations. The assessment formed the evidence based on drafting the new cybersecurity strategy. The drafting phase then took about 3 months, 3 to 4 months, during which time the team worked closely with the MOPT and other GOL stakeholders, the World Bank, and other partners to ensure the strategy was practical, tailored to Liberia's context, and aligned with international standards. And so that brings us to where we are now. The strength of the strategy today has been finalized, approved, and by the Liberian government, and now sharing it with stakeholders across the sector as we prepare for implementation. The national vision, the vision statement, as you will see it over there, starting up to say that to establish a strong, sustainable foundation to secure I'm sorry, that's technology.
For those of us online, can we build ourselves so we don't get to hear you whilst you're not presenting? Thank you.
Thank you. So I go back to the vision statement. To establish a strong, sustainable foundation for secure, resilient, and trusted digital ecosystems in Liberia, enabling economic growth, ensuring safety, fostering confidence, and safeguarding the privacy for all citizens. So before we start looking at the strategy and its specific objective, let me turn your attention to the vision statement as I just read. Take a moment to review as you see. There are 7 important parts there. So pay attention to the vision statement, please. 1. The National Cybersecurity Strategy of Liberia is designed to build a strong, sustainable foundation for a secure and resilient digital future. 2. It also aims to establish trusted digital ecosystem. 3. The goal is also to ensure safety of citizens and their privacy, supporting their confidence in being part of the Liberian cyberspace. The vision reflects the long-term goals and it is set within 5 years planning horizon of the National Cybersecurity Strategy. As you will see, the strategy has pillars. The 3 of them: build, protect, and sustain. The National Cybersecurity Strategy is organized around 3 strategic pillars: build, protect, and sustain. Each pillar focuses on a specific set of objectives, but together they form one integrated approach toward our overreaching goal: a secure and resilient digital ecosystem in Liberia. The first pillar, build, it focuses on establishing the foundation. This includes an effective governance model and a strong policy, legal, and regulatory environment. This means putting in place the right institutions, laws, and rules so that cybersecurity is properly managed and coordinated across government. The second pillar, protect, is all about operational capacity. It includes establishing a national incident response system, strengthening national cyber readiness, and enhancing our ability to combat cybercrime. This is where we move from planning to real-world action, such as detecting, responding, and mitigating threats. The third pillar, sustain. As you know, sustainability is a very important part. Most times we have things done, but to maintain it, to keep it going as it's supposed to be. So So the third pillar speaks on a sustainability, which is sustain. It focuses on long term. This entails building national cybersecurity education and skills, raising awareness, enhancing international cooperation, and creating a local market for cybersecurity services. We should not always bring them from South Africa, from Senegal, from the US, from Canada. Let's have a local market. These pillars are interconnected. Progress in one of the area makes progress in all. In short, these three pillars build, protect, and sustain provide a clear, practical roadmap for making Liberia's digital future secure, resilient, and self-reliant. So, pillar one, as we were talking about, I will go into a little detail about that. Our goal under this bill is to put in place the 4 building blocks of cybersecurity governance. In other words, the institution, the leadership, the legal framework that will make everything possible. The first objective, establishing a governance model, focuses on creating a clear, functional structure for how cybersecurity is led and coordinated in Liberia. Now scatter. This includes appointing a national cybersecurity coordinator, a single high-level coordinator responsible for developing national cybersecurity efforts across government. Designing cybersecurity focus point, designating cybersecurity focus point in each key ministry and agency to ensure consistency in coordination. Establishing the National Cybersecurity Council, which will serve as the main platform for cross-governmental sector decision making and setting up operational framework for the council and coordinators. Along with a strategic roadmap and define how national cybersecurity governance will evolve over the time. The second objective is to enable the privacy, legal, and regulatory environment. This is where we make sure that the rules are clear and up to date. Liberia must urgently adopt a National Cybersecurity Act. And as it is, the chairman on Post and Telecom from yesterday meeting spoke about that, and we are very pleased as to where it is now. We will also move up and align supporting laws like the Cybercrime Act, the Data Protection and Privacy Act, and potential critical infrastructure legislation. Very important. Critical infrastructure will include LEC, water and sewer, and all other telcos, as you would think, the gas, the fuel oil, all those things are all considered critical or should be considered critical infrastructure. In addition, sector-specific regulations will be developed for key areas such as telecommunication, and I can attest to that. LTA has moved very well. I was part of a validation that took place or discussion. So thank you, LTA. The banking, energy, transportation, and public sector, ensuring that cybersecurity becomes a legal and operational requirement across all critical infrastructure. Finally, the strategy calls for the adoption of operational packages or practical guidelines, templates, and procedures that will help institutions implement these laws effectively. In short, Pillar 1 is about building the fundamental and governance as well as legal structure that Liberia needs as they move forward. Pillar 2, protect. The second pillar, protect, focuses on strengthening Liberia's ability to defend, detect, and respond in cyber threats and incidents. We know that cybersecurity incidents in Liberia and those that are coming up more frequently and are more serious, affecting telecommunications, banking, and even public services to meet this challenge. We need a coordinated national plan that brings together institutions, regulators, and operators of critical infrastructure under one framework. This pillar is about turning plans into action, building that real capacity to respond when incidents happen and preventing them before they happen. The first objective, establishing the national incident response capacity, is about creating the structure needed for national level response and coordination. We will begin by setting up an incident response task force under the National Cybersecurity Council, a dedicated team that can coordinate, detect, respond to major national crises. We will also plan to set up for large scale and run national cybersecurity exercises from time to time. All of this will feed into the roadmap of establishing a permanent national incident response unit, a feature that sees search for Liberia. The second objective focuses on cyber resilience and risk management. We will develop a national cybersecurity framework, a unified approach to how institutions identify, assess, and manage cyber risks. This includes defining baseline cybersecurity measures, setting the framework and the minimum standards that will keep all institutions in place for them to make sure to ensure that consistent protection across government and critical infrastructure exists. And the third objective is about strengthening our ability to combat cybercrime. Here, Liberia will accelerate the adoption of a comprehensive cybercrime framework, ensuring that law enforcement agencies have the right legal and real technical tools to get the work done. We will also establish a cybercrime reporting channel within Liberia National Police, improve technical infrastructure, or digital forensic and investigation, and implement national cybercrime management system to coordinate cases and data across all institutions. In short, Pillar 2 protect is where we move, where the government is going to be in action. It's about building a real resilience that Liberians will trust in the prevention, the response, and the recovery from cyber attack. On the same pillar three. Pillar three, something is about ensuring that Liberia's progress in cybersecurity is long-term and self-reinforcing. If we don't do this, most of the work that will be done will go into cybersecurity cannot be managed on external support. The objective is to strengthen cybersecurity education. We will define a national educational framework integrated with digital safety and cyber literacy into schools curriculum, and designate a cybersecurity education cluster to coordinate training and research. We will also build stronger links between universities and employers, promote research and innovation, and ensure inclusive participation, including initiatives and that support women in cybersecurity. This is to build a national cybersecurity culture through awareness. This includes conducting national cybersecurity awareness campaigns and organizing regular activities to promote safe online behavior among citizens, businesses, and the public in general. This focuses on the third, which is the objective. Number three, focuses on international cooperation. Liberia will align its national framework with regional and global standards. As to the international convention and seek membership in global cybersecurity networks like FIRST. We will also appoint a cybersecurity ambassador, strengthening bilateral and multilateral partnership, carrying out international support for capacity building and knowledge sharing. And finally, the fourth objective ensures that cybersecurity becomes part of how business is done in Liberia. In short, the goal is aimed at creating the right ecosystem that develop our people, build awareness, connect Liberia globally, and embed cybersecurity into the everyday operation of both government and the private sector. The success factor. As we conclude, it's important to focus on how the national cybersecurity strategy will be implemented. Only because a good plan only matters if it is put into action effectively. Success will depend on three key factors: strong governance, sufficient resources, and strong system for monitoring and evaluation. Implementation happens in two phases. Phase one, from now to 2026, sometime 2026, focusing on getting the fundamental in place, such as creating the National Cybersecurity Council, the National Cybersecurity Coordinator, and the Technical Task Force to lead incident response effort. These can be set up quickly with existing structure like what we have in place, the CIO framework. That is already in place. We don't need to go and look for something new. We can just tweak it and make it ready to go. In phase 2, from 2027 to 2029, focus on long-term capacity. This includes preparing for the creation of National Cybersecurity Agency and transitioning the council and coordinator into advisory and oversight roles. To succeed, we will need to ensure smart resources allocation. The government will need but partnership with the private sector and the development partner will be very crucial. Regulation will also play a big role in monitoring private sector investment, especially by requiring operators of critical infrastructure to maintain cybersecurity capacity inside Liberia. Let us not bring them from outside. Set it up in Liberia. Then we'll create jobs for our people. So, next, we'll be talking about the total implementation, but that will come at a later date. However, let me end this way. Finally, monitoring and evaluation will keep a strong and vibrant cybersecurity on track. The National Cybersecurity Strategy will be reviewed annually to adjust for changing technology and threats, with major review planned for 2027 to 2029. The Ministry of Posts and Telecommunications and the National Cybersecurity Council will lead this process, supported by feedback from implementing institutions. In short, the National Cybersecurity Strategy is comprehensive, but it also cannot include everything that we want. It is a living strategy with clear leadership, contribution, and accountability. It will strengthen Liberia's digital future and protect the system. Our society depends on us. I thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for your very example. Next, we'll have people move forward. This will be the final presentation before we do the first round of question and answer, as we continue this digital week in Liberia. He will be presenting on cybersecurity PPP report. Rafael, it's over to you.
Great. Well, thank you very much again, and I really want to commend the Ministry of Posts and Telecommunications for the strategy. I think it really captures essential elements, which is something that has to be implementable, practical, and really focuses on building Liberia's sovereignty. And this is maybe the transition to the public-private partnership paper, because one of the things that we realized as we did the assessment and worked with our colleagues in Liberia is that ultimately, at the end of the day, cybersecurity has to be something which is built in and owned by Liberia. So the question was, how do you do that? What is that practice? Now, the paper I presented was originally written in 2015. 2024. A time which now feels like a different era. We drafted our recommendations assuming continued U.S. financial assistance, sustained international cooperation, and a rule-based international order to prioritize collective cyber defense. Now, the world has changed rather dramatically since 2024. The elections brought a fundamental shift in American foreign policy. The subsequent withdrawal of U.S. assistance has affected critical programs across Liberia: cybersecurity initiatives, healthcare, and education. USAID alone invested over $2 billion since 2003, accounting for a large share of Liberia's budget. Now, some may argue that these developments have rendered our original paper obsolete, that recommendations built on the assumption of international support no longer apply. I'd argue the opposite. These geopolitical shifts have actually vindicated our findings. They've made our central argument more urgent than ever. Countries must develop sustainable, locally rooted solutions to their cybersecurity challenges. What the past year has taught us is that we cannot build national security's foundations that we do not control. We must be nimble, adaptive, and creative. We must create a secure and sustainable national cyberspace regardless of which way international winds blow. So let me start with the numbers that define Liberia's cybersecurity challenge. The Ministry of Posts and Telecommunications, the designated lead institution for cybersecurity, operates on an annual budget of around $1.8 million to support 370 staff. Now let's pause on that figure. 1.8 million in Ghana or Kenya might spend on securing their own corporate infrastructure. It's virtually impossible to attract or retain cybersecurity professionals when the public sector IT salaries average less than $500 a month, and where the regional market for these skills pays multiples that amount. The reality is, Liberia is not competing with neighboring ministries. You're competing with San Francisco, Berlin, London, Accra. This resource constraint is compounded by geopolitical reality. In early 2025, the United States suspended significant bilateral assistance to Liberia, and this has funded a large share of your budget. I mentioned this not to dwell on problems, but to really underscore the relevance of the findings of the public-private partnership paper. The paper suggests that there's a fundamental shift needed in how we think about cybersecurity capacity in resource-constrained environments. Rather than viewing cybersecurity as a purely governmental function requiring constant budgetary support, we need to approach it as a market opportunity, one where public policy creates conditions for the private sector investment that simultaneously serves commercial interests and national security objectives. Now, this is not privatizing national security. It's recognizing that in the 21st century, the most effective way for governments to fulfill their security mandate is often by setting the rules of the game and creating the enabling conditions, rather than attempting to develop and operate all the necessary capabilities internally. In Togo, which I talked about earlier, a country with economic circumstances not dissimilar to Liberia's, they established something remarkable, the Cyber Defense Africa Initiative, a joint venture between the government and a private cybersecurity firm, Asseco Data Systems. The government invested about $2 million for a 68% stake. The private sector partner contributed $3 million for the remaining share. But here's a crucial innovation. From inception, this entity was designed to offer commercial cybersecurity services, vulnerability testing, security audits, cyber intelligence training, 24/7 incident management to generate revenues necessary to support the national CSIRT function. This model has proven remarkably effective. The venture attracted an additional $7 million in seed funding from a local bank, and by 2023, as I mentioned before, half the loan was already repaid, not from government appropriations, but from commercial revenue. Think about what this means. Togo created a functional national cybersecurity incident response team, not in 10 years through capacity building programs, but in 3 years through a properly structured partnership. The regional orientation of their business model is particularly instructive. By serving clients across West Africa, they've expanded their market and accelerated financial sustainability. Another example, in the United Kingdom, the National Cybersecurity Center contracted with a commercial company to provide something called protected DNS services to over 1,200 public service organizations. This arrangement, which was valued at around $39 million, over 7 years delivered an estimated benefit of over $80 million in prevented losses. The United States followed suit with this cybersecurity agency awarding a commercial contract for over $112 million to federal agencies. So what is protected DNS? It's a filtering system that sits between users and the internet, blocking access to known malicious domains before they can compromise systems. Security infrastructure delivery as a service. No need to build in-house, maintain specialized staff, or upgrade hardware. For Liberia, this kind of systems offers transformative potential. Rather than each ministry attempting to secure its own network infrastructure, lacking budget and expertise, a single protected DNS service can shield your entire public sector. This can be structured as revenue generating, government entities paying subscriptions, critical infrastructure operators using it as a service as part of the licensing condition. Now, Austria offers an entirely different approach, one built upon an industry initiative. In 1998, the Association of Internet Service Providers established the National Domain Registry, NICAT. In 2008, that registry, funded by telecommunications industry membership fees and commercial revenue, established and began funding Austria's national CERT. Since 2008, that Austria's national CERT has managed all technical and operational components of the government CERT. The federal chancellery provides strategic direction, but it relies on industry-funded resources for incident response, prevention, technical tasks. This arrangement effectively subsidizes government cybersecurity operations through telecommunications industry resources at a minimum cost to the state budget. Now, based on an analysis of successful models globally and an assessment of Liberia's specific context, the study suggested 4 relevant pathways. Pathway 1, structured cybersecurity PPPs, or formal partnerships with contractually defined sustainable revenue models. For Liberia, this could be a full PPP covering core national CSRIC functions, or limited PPPs for specific sector services like training or public sector incident response. These require initial government investments, but deliver capabilities much faster than traditional approaches. Pathway 2, industry-led partnerships. Partnerships emerging through industry leadership with limited public sector contribution. This means sectoral CSRICs serving telecommunications, banking, energy. Your telecommunications providers, MTN, Orange, Telecel, already provide cybersecurity services to their enterprise clients. They have the expertise, infrastructure, and commercial interest to secure digital environments, but they need to have the incentive to be able to do so. Third pathway, strategic outsourcing. Long-term contracts with specialized service providers delivering comprehensive functions. Priority areas include DNS for specialized penetration policy development for. Unlike building capacities in-house, this provides immediate access to specialized expertise. A fourth pathway, incentive-based regulatory mechanisms that I talked about before, but perhaps the most powerful lever requiring the least direct government expenditure. Rather than the government paying for services, regulatory mechanisms create market incentives to stimulate the private sector investment. And let me give you specific examples of how this kind of regulatory incentive has created market incentives in other contexts. Localization requirements, which were talked about in the last talk. India requires all telecom entities to appoint a chief telecommunications security officer who must be an Indian citizen resident in India. This creates an immediate market of demand for locally based senior cybersecurity professionals. Licensing requirements. Ghana's approach offers a relevant regional example. Since 2020, cybersecurity service provision requires accreditation and licensing. Foreign entities must obtain local registration or demonstrate partnership with Ghanaian-owned providers. By September 2024, Ghana had licensed over 252 cybersecurity service providers and over 1,400 professionals. Critical infrastructure requirements. Requiring telecommunications companies, banks, energy providers to maintain domestic cybersecurity operations as part of their licensing prerequisites. Companies must invest in local cybersecurity capabilities to maintain their operating license. And this creates jobs, expands expertise, stimulates demand for local service providers, and ensures that there are in-country response teams when things happen. And finally, procurement preferences. Strategic use of government purchasing power. preferred procurement from local providers, certification requirements for coordinated spending, create sustained market demand, justifying private sector investment. Regulation creates demand, demand justifies investment, investment builds capabilities, capabilities enable services, services generate revenue, revenue enables sustainability. Now, implementation requirements. I want to be direct about what this means. First, we need to fix the fundamentals. Adopting a national cybersecurity strategy, core legislation, sectoral regulations. These aren't bureaucratic paperwork. They're foundations enabling everything else. Draft documents exist. What's needed is a political will to push them through for adoption. Second, institutional clarity. Single government entity is contracting authority with clear mandate, adequate capacity for negotiation and management, accountability for outcomes is absolutely crucial. Third, phased approach. Begin with pilots. Maybe it's protected DNS for government networks, training partnerships with universities, demonstrate value, build confidence, learn, then scale. Fourth, sustain private sector engagement. Telecommunications companies, IT providers, academic institutions must be consulted extensively. Build trust through collaboration before formalizing partnerships. Fifth, creative funding. Explore blended finance combining concessional loans with private investment. Consider tax benefits, guaranteed contracts, untapped revenue sources like, for example, the TLB income, CCTLB income. So colleagues, the evidence is clear. Countries with similar constraints as Liberia have successfully developed cybersecurity capability by creating conditions for private sector investment rather than relying on government-led initiatives. Togo's public-private partnership around the answer, Austria's industry-funded capabilities, Ghana's regulatory framework. Protected DNS services in the UK and the US, these are not theoretical models. They're working examples of how market-oriented approaches accelerate capability development while ensuring sustainability. For Liberia, strategic private sector engagement represents not merely an alternative, but an essential strategy for sustainable national cybersecurity capabilities. By combining regulatory incentives with well-designed partnerships, you can build a secure digital future, protecting critical infrastructure, creating economic value and opportunity, and enhancing national resilience. The withdrawal of substantial U.S. assistance adds urgency, but also creates opportunity. The alternative, a continuing dependence on donor programs and traditional government capacity building, simply isn't viable given fiscal realities. The tools are available, the models are proven. What's required is a vision to recognize that leveraging private sector capabilities through smart policy isn't compromise. It's the most effective path to a genuinely secure and sovereign future for Liberia. Thank you for your attention, and I really look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Rafal, and hopefully you can drink some water now. All right. Well, we'll now take 3 questions because of time. We have the panel discussion next, so we'll take 3 questions. Yes, gentleman in the white and yellow shirt. I mean, you can just take the microphone there. Oh, you want to come to properly? It's okay. Yeah.
Good afternoon. My convenient documentation is presented to Digital Liberia Week, a member of this digitalization Liberia ecosystem. In our matrimonial country, Liberia has been vandalized by civil crisis. We need role-building network technology for advancement, device transportation equipment in urban setting, machinery and computer science and engineering solutions. Complementary, I entreat the World Bank and other organizations, UNICEF, international organization for the government and rural development process and initiative, decentralization power, resources management, and community empowerment, and policy planning integration.
Did you ask the question?
Yeah, I was.
So let's get to the question.
All right.
We don't have time. Let's get to
My question is that the cybersecurity threat, which have been a pandemic, continue to endanger our digital world, personal profile, computer, and data storage. Cyber threats which have already eclipsed our digital network with the AI development technologies for a remedy in resilient cyber analysis framework against malware.
So Chief, if you don't have a
No, ransomware, phishing, and social engineering designed to jeopardize our internet system and networking. Fellow panelists, I have a job for immediate resolution that can be promising and ensure a fortress against our digital identity.
Can we have the next actual question? Yes, sir, please go ahead. This time I prefer you ask them there. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. My name is Felix Thompson. I'm an independent security researcher. I have a question for Is this still on?
Yes, he is.
Raphael, thanks so much for the detailed assessment. Perhaps you have touched on a question, but I was just wondering, and here's a question. What immediate actions are being recommended based on your assessment findings? And also, how can local tech startups and innovators be integrated into national cybersecurity efforts here in Liberia? Thank you.
So Rafa, you can just respond briefly, and then we take the next.
So I'll respond briefly. I mean, first of all, really good to see you that you're participating in this event. A lot of what you asked is actually in the recommendations document, but I think just to restate it, it's really two things. One is we need to adopt the proper governance frameworks right away, and that means having those foundational documents that be presented by the ministry in place, including, I think, addressing the fact that there is a need for international operators that operate in Liberia to actually have an obligation to hire staff in Liberia, or to use people like yourself in Liberia to be able to respond to security incidents. I think that's absolutely crucial, because right now, essentially, Liberia is being colonized by operators that simply don't create the jobs that are needed in Liberia around cybersecurity, where there are individuals like yourself and companies like those that you either work with that represent a skill set that's simply not being used. On the previous question, cybercrime is really important to take into consideration. I was part of the signing ceremony in Hanoi for the global cybercrime convention. It's a $10.5 trillion business. When you think about $10.5 trillion, that's more than the GDP of every country on earth except for China and the United States. So dealing with that, or at least having a mechanism to be able to deal with that locally, is crucially important, because otherwise the possibility of being criminalized cyberspace effectively will be quite significant. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Steve Benjamin Myers. I'd like to begin from the point that was stressed by nano crime. You said that in the organization of the cybersecurity agency, three basic things are to be taken into consideration. One, strong governance, monitoring, and resources. And if I can piggyback on a point that was stressed by Raphael Romansiski, he mentioned that Liberia is going to be competing with Ghana, Accra, United States, and other places, which informs me lastly that this is capital intensive, and I'm particularly concerned about the resource mobilization capacity we have to support this. Because if we should go by the stats I was given by Rafael, he says that it is a $10.5 trillion business we're talking about, which is far above the GDP of all other countries, except two countries in the world, China and the United States. I want they tell us as to whether in their assessment they've identified a particular source of funding that Liberia is going to be directed towards that. Because if we must make a competitive argument that this must be localized and Liberia should be given priority, we cannot be holistically reliant on the mobilization of foreign capital, because we all understand that having these bilateral arrangements, of course, there will be demands, and we have to give in because we're borrowing money. But if it must be a holistic Liberian thing, then we'll have to figure out ways to mobilize capital domestically to be able to own it. Have we identified that resource, envelope? Sorry.
Rafael?
Well,
Okay, so
I'd say that cybersecurity is less capital intensive than it's human capital intensive, and here's what I meant when I talked in my talk about that. Right now, globally, there's a deficit in cybersecurity skills of about 4.8 million individuals. In other words, there's 4.8 million more positions in cybersecurity globally than there are people to fill it. What that means is that Liberia doesn't compete against itself for hiring people. You're competing for people that are needed in other places where they have higher value markets. That's just the reality of it. So the incentive structure has to change somewhat. And that's where the public-private partnerships come into place. Because at the end of the day, cybersecurity skills are what they're known as low density and high value. For the most part, a security responder will work for one agency, maybe an hour or two a day. So being able to take advantage of companies which concentrate these skills and make them available when they're needed, rather than trying to hire them yourselves, is one way to get over that human capital gap. But otherwise, yeah, this is a pervasive problem. I'd argue, and maybe in the discussion we can talk about it, that there are ways in which emerging economies like Liberia can actually compete, and that actually is in the area of artificial intelligence, believe it or not, which may seem counterintuitive, but maybe we can leave that to the panel discussion. Thank you.
So Mr. Keane wanted to come in? Mr. Keane, you still want to come in? In response to that question, before we take the final one.
I think Robert said it, but let me just add a little bit. From our context, we will not start as a $1 trillion company or country. We have designed it in a way, or we will be designing it in a way that we go step by step. There are just fundamental, like the fundamental I was thinking about, putting the governance in place, then from there the next step to the next step. So, why is true we don't have a whole full of money, as it is always priority, we are starting it little by little, step by step. Put those basics in place, and then you will get to where you want to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Or the final question.
Mr. Raphael, so just to add to what Mr. Kambia said, we understand those challenges that we have limited resources and we have unlimited problems. But cybersecurity having to be one of the key areas that we focus on administrative focus and telecommunication. So what do we do in a short period of time so that we do results? So we have put some mechanisms in place by collaborating with regional partners. So last week, just want to share this news with you now. Last week, Mr. Kanmasa was in Benin Republic. We did launch the first West Africa information sharing center. So what that means is that if a cyber threat is detected somewhere in Ghana, maybe there's anomalies happening on their network, and then they detect it, and they can inform us in Liberia, okay, there's this cyber attacks happening here, so this is how you protect us. But when in the case that Liberia don't have an adequate qualified specialist to actually detect, monitor, or maybe mitigate that particular incident. What we can do for that moment, I would believe from the Sierra Leone, our national security, Benin, or Togo, they all join together and come in the capital of Liberia and be able to resolve that problem. So these are the regular mechanisms we have put in place for now. We know we don't have resources to resolve our problem, but these are some of the mechanisms we have put in place just so that Republic can know that not that we're just sitting idly, that we're not making any effort, but these are some of the regional efforts we have put in place, and it's actually working at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. The final question, gentlemen, that will be the final question, then we transition to the panel conversation.
My name is Peter Hino, I work with West Africa ICT Action Network. I have a quick question here. What specific measure will be taken to address the cybersecurity talent gap in Liberia? We look at developing a robust pool of cybersecurity professionals. And throughout the presentation, I feel there's a strong need that we actually specifically speak about the need to develop a cybersecurity gap in Liberia. So my question is, what is the measure and how can we get there? Because we do need a secure that industry and develop the talent locally. Liberia must run the cybersecurity space. Thank you.
Mr. Kai?
I can add maybe one comment on that. I'd say that Liberia has much of a the big challenge is finding jobs for Liberians in cybersecurity in Liberia. How do you keep them in Monrovia as opposed to having them go abroad, whether virtually or in person? That's the challenge. That's the institutional framework of where public-private partnerships, regulatory levers can really make a difference. Make jobs available for Liberians in Liberia by essentially compelling those international operators, whether they're in energy, telecommunications, and banking, to maintain cybersecurity teams inside of Liberia, to make it part of Liberia's growth strategy. I think that's something